The phone rang at 4:47 inches the morning. I know the exact time because I had been lying awake staring at the ceiling for the past hour, the way I always did when the ache in my chest got too heavy to sleep through. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost turned over and pulled the blanket up and told myself it was a wrong number. It was not a wrong number. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Priya Nathanson, a nephrologist at St. David's Medical Center in Austin. She asked if I was the father of a 16-year-old girl named Lily. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. I had not spoken to Lily in 4 years. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My name is Gerald. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer in Houston before I retired, and I like to think I was good at it. I built things meant to last: bridges, parking structures, a hospital extension that is still standing in Katy, Texas, and will likely be standing long after I am gone. I understood how things were supposed to hold together. I understood load and stress and what a structure could bear before it failed. I did not understand my marriage until it was already too late. My wife, my ex-wife, is a woman named Renee. I met her at a work conference in San Antonio when I was 34 and she was 29. She was smart and funny and more beautiful than I had any business being near, and I told myself I was the luckiest man in the world when she said yes to dinner. 2 years later, she said yes to a ring. A year after that, we had a daughter, and we named her Lily, because Renee said she wanted something that sounded like it belonged in a garden. For a while, things were good. Or I believed they were good. I worked long hours because that is what engineers did in those years, and Renee stayed home with Lily and then later took a part-time job at a property management company downtown. We had a house in the Heights. We had a dog. We took Lily to Galveston every summer and let her chase seagulls until she fell down laughing in the sand. I thought we were a family. What I did not know, what I would not find out for many years, was that Renee had been seeing someone else since the second year of our marriage. His name was Damon. He worked at the same property management company. I never met him. Renee made sure of that. When Lily was 10 years old, Renee sat me down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday night and told me she wanted a divorce. She said she had been unhappy for a long time. She said she needed to find herself. I asked her what that meant. She said I would not understand. She was probably right, because I did not understand any of it. I sat at that table for a long time after she went to bed, and I stared at the coffee I had poured and never touched, and I thought about all the bridges I had built and how strange it was that I had not noticed the one beneath my own feet was failing. The divorce was not kind. Renee hired a lawyer named Cynthia Marsh, who was known in Houston family court circles as someone who did not come to negotiate. She came to win. I hired a decent man named Roland, who had a good reputation and a gentle manner, and I learned too late that a gentle manner is not always what you need in a courtroom. By the time it was over, Renee had primary custody of Lily. I had every other weekend and a phone call on Wednesday nights. I had the right to attend school events and medical appointments with reasonable notice. I paid child support and kept Lily on my health insurance and drove the 40 minutes each way twice a month to pick her up and bring her back to my apartment on Shepherd Drive. Those weekends were the best part of my life. Lily and I would go to the Museum of Natural Science and argue about whether dinosaurs were actually birds. We would drive out to Brenham for kolaches and eat them in the car with the windows down. She liked true crime podcasts and terrible horror movies, and a specific brand of grapefruit sparkling water that I kept stocked in my refrigerator just for her visits. I learned everything she would let me learn. I listened as hard as I had ever listened to anything. Then, when Lily was 12, Renee got remarried. His name was Damon. Of course it was. The move happened 3 months after the wedding. Renee called me on a Sunday night to inform me that she and Damon were relocating to Austin for his job and that she had already filed a modification with the court to adjust my visitation schedule given the new distance. I drove to Austin twice a month for the next year. Then Renee's attorney filed again, citing disruption to Lily's schooling and extracurricular schedule. The judge adjusted again. Monthly visits. Then summer only, with holidays alternating. Then Lily stopped returning my calls. I want to be careful here about how I tell this part, because it would be easy and I was tempted, Lord knows I was tempted to paint Lily as a villain in her own story. She was 12 years old, then 13, then 14. She was a child living in a house with a mother who had a version of events that I was not there to counter. I do not know exactly what she was told. I know only that the girl who used to argue with me about feathered dinosaurs and fall asleep in my car on the way home from Brenham stopped picking up when I called. And then stopped responding to texts. And then, after a particularly brief and painful visit when she was 15, told me without quite looking at me that she thought it might be better if we gave each other some space. I drove back to Houston that night with my hands gripped so hard on the steering wheel that my knuckles hurt for 3 days. I did not call again. I told myself I was respecting her wishes. Maybe I was. Maybe I was also protecting myself from something I did not know how to survive. That was the year she turned 16. That was the year Dr. Nathanson called me at 4:47 inches the morning. Lily had been admitted 2 days earlier with what presented as a severe urinary tract infection. By the time they got the imaging back, it was clear the infection had masked something much worse. Her right kidney had been failing silently for what the doctors estimated was the better part of a year. The left kidney was compensating, but not well enough. She needed a transplant. Living donors typically offered the best outcomes, and the best living donors were first-degree biological relatives. Dr. Nathanson asked if I would come in for a preliminary screening. I was on I-10 before the sun came up. Austin in November is gray and cold in a way that surprises people who think Texas does not do cold. I arrived at the hospital just after 8 and sat in a consultation room that smelled like hand sanitizer and old carpet and waited. A nurse brought me a paper cup of coffee that I did not drink. I sat with my hands on my knees like a man waiting for a verdict, which is exactly what I was. Renee arrived 20 minutes after I did. We had not been in the same room in 2 years. She looked at me the way you look at weather you did not expect, not quite hostile, not quite willing to be anything else. Damon was with her. He was a broad-shouldered man about my height, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome once and now just looked certain of itself. He shook my hand with the practiced confidence of a man who has never doubted his place in a room. I shook back. I was there for my daughter. Nothing else mattered. The preliminary screening was straightforward. Blood type, basic health panel. The nurse explained that a full compatibility workup would take longer. But the first step was to confirm blood type compatibility. I am type O positive, which I have known since my Army physical at 22. I filled out the paperwork and rolled up my sleeve and let them take what they needed. Then a social worker named Brenda led me down the hall and into a room where Lily was lying in a hospital bed with an IV in her left arm and a television mounted on the wall playing something she was not watching. She looked so much older than I expected. And smaller. She had Renee's cheekbones and a scattering of freckles I did not remember being there before. Her hair was pulled up in a way that made her look both younger and more tired than 16 had any right to be. She looked at me when I came in. I waited for her to say something. She did not. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. I said, "Hello, sweetheart." I said, "I got here as fast as I could." She looked at the television for a moment. Then she said, "They said you volunteered." I said, "Yes." She was quiet again. Then she said, "You did not have to do that." I said, "I know." She did not say anything else for a while. I did not push. I had learned a long time ago that you cannot rush a person towards something they are not ready for. You just have to be present. You have to stay in the room. Eventually, she said, "Mom said you stopped trying." I felt that in a place I do not have a name for. I said, "I never stopped trying. I stopped calling because you asked me to, and I thought it was what you needed. But I never stopped." She looked at me then, really looked. I do not know what she saw. I hope it was the truth. The compatibility results came back 48 hours later. I was in the hospital cafeteria eating a sandwich I did not taste when Dr. Nathanson asked if she could speak with me privately. I followed her into a small office just off the main corridor, and she closed the door, and she sat down across from me, and she looked at me in a way that made me put the sandwich down. She said the blood type was a match. She said that was good news. Then she said there was something else. She said the lab had run the standard compatibility panel, which included a more detailed antigen profile. She said the results had come back in a way that was, and she paused here, unexpected. I waited. She said that based on the markers in the panel, there was a significant statistical discrepancy that the lab wanted to flag before proceeding. She said she had run it a second time. The second result was the same. I said, "Just tell me what it means." She said, "Mr. Gerald, the markers we are seeing are not consistent with a first-degree paternal biological relationship." She said that did not mean I could not still donate. There were other compatibility factors that mattered, but that the lab had flagged the result because it was their protocol to do so when they encountered this kind of discrepancy. The room was very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. I could hear someone in the hallway laughing at something. I said, "Are you telling me I am not her biological father?" She did not look away. She said, "That is what the preliminary markers suggest." She said I could request a full paternity panel if I wanted to confirm it. She said it was entirely my decision. I sat there for what felt like a long time. I thought about Renee at that kitchen table telling me she needed to find herself. I thought about Damon and his certain face and the way he shook my hand. I thought about 12 years of weekends and Wednesday phone calls and the drive to Austin twice a month and kolaches eaten out of a paper bag in a parking lot in Brenham. Then I said, "Can I still donate?" Dr. Nathanson said, "Yes. The antigen markers are actually quite compatible despite the paternity question. You may be one of her best options." I said, "Then let's keep going." She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "I want to make sure you understand what you are agreeing to." I said, "I understand. She is my daughter. She needs a kidney." I requested the full paternity panel. I do not know exactly why. Perhaps because I needed to know the truth, the way you need to know whether a structure has failed not to punish it, but to understand what actually happened. The results came back in 3 days and confirmed what the preliminary markers had suggested. Lily was not my biological daughter. I did not tell anyone. Not at first. I sat with it alone in my hotel room near the hospital and stared at the results on my phone and thought about who I was and who I had been and what either of those things meant now. What I kept coming back to was Lily in that hospital bed saying, "They said you volunteered." I kept coming back to the kolaches. I kept coming back to the feathered dinosaurs. On the 4th day, Renee came to find me in the hospital lobby. Damon was not with her. She sat down across from me in one of the hard plastic chairs, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she said the doctors had told her there were some unusual markers in my panel. She said they had not told her what it meant. She asked if I would tell her. I looked at her for a long time. I thought about how to do this. I thought about anger, because I had earned the right to anger. I thought about everything that had been taken from me and whether she understood the weight of it. Then I said, "Lily is not my biological daughter." The color left Renee's face so fast it looked like a light being switched off. She said nothing. She pressed her lips together and looked at the floor, and I watched her do the math I had already done. I said, "I already know. I do not need you to confirm it. What I need is for you to understand what I am about to do and why." She looked up. I said, "I am going to donate my kidney to Lily. Not because of biology, because I am her father. Because I was there when she took her first steps, and I was there at every school play I was allowed to attend, and I drove to Austin twice a month for a year when you moved without asking me. I am her father because I chose to be, and that choice does not expire because of a lab result." Renee was crying. I had not expected that. She was trying to hold it back and failing. And for a moment she looked very much like the woman I had married, and I felt something complicated move through me and then settle. She said, "I am sorry." I said, "I know." She said, "I have been so wrong about so many things." I said, I know that too. We did not solve anything that afternoon. There was too much to solve, and too many years between us, and too much damage done to clear it in a hospital lobby. But something shifted. Something that had been locked for a long time moved. Just a little. The donation surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the time between, Lily and I talked every day. At first, it was careful and quiet. She would come to my room in the hospital, or we would sit in the atrium downstairs and drink bad coffee and talk about nothing important. She told me about her school. She was in an AP history class that she loved and a chemistry class she hated. She told me about a girl named Sophie who was her best friend and a boy named Marcus who was probably more than a friend, and she looked at her shoes when she said it, and I felt something open up in my chest that I had not felt in a long time. On the 6th day, she asked me why I had not called her back after she told me she needed space. I said I thought I was doing what she wanted. I said I thought maybe distance was what she needed to figure out who she was. She said, "I needed you to fight for me." I said, "I know that now. I am sorry I did not understand it then." She said, "Mom told me you gave up." I said, "Your mother was wrong about that. I never gave up. I just did not know how to hold on without hurting you." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Are you scared about the surgery?" I said, "A little, but not about the surgery itself. More about what comes after." She asked what I meant. I said, "I have spent 4 years on the outside of your life. I would like not to be there anymore. But that is your decision to make, and whatever you decide, I will respect it." She looked at me the way Lily used to look at me when she was small and working out whether something was true. Then she said, "I don't want you to be on the outside either. I am not ashamed to tell you that I cried. I am 63 years old, and I have built bridges and survived a divorce that nearly broke me in half, and I cried in the atrium of Street David's Medical Center in Austin, Texas, over a cup of bad coffee and a daughter who had finally said the thing I had been waiting 4 years to hear. The surgery went well. My surgeon was a calm woman named Dr. Okafor, who had hands that looked too small for the work she did, and a confidence that made you believe everything was going to be fine. Lily's surgery was performed simultaneously in the adjacent suite. We were in recovery at the same time, on the same floor, and when they finally let me walk down the hall to see her, she was pale and tired and hooked to more machines than I liked, and she held out her hand when she saw me coming. I held it. I want to tell you that the rest was simple after that. It was not. Nothing is simple after that much time and that much damage. Renee and I have spoken several more times since the surgery. There are lawyers involved again, not in a combative way, but in the way of people trying to untangle something that should have been untangled years ago. I have learned things I did not know and confirmed things I suspected, and there are nights when the anger still comes up in my throat and I have to sit with it until it passes. Damon is no longer in the picture. I do not know the details, and I am not sure I want to. What I know is this. Lily called me last Sunday. She called me on a Sunday afternoon, which is not a court-ordered call time or a scheduled check-in. She called me because she wanted to tell me she got an A on her AP history essay. She called me because she found a podcast about a shipwreck off the coast of Galveston and thought I would like it. She called me because I am her father, and that is what daughters do when they want to talk to their fathers. I do not have a name on a birth certificate that connects us by blood. I have something I believe is more durable than that. I have 31 years of building things meant to last, and I have learned in the most painful way possible that the structures that matter most are not the ones made of steel and concrete. They are the ones you build out of showing up, out of driving 4 hours and sitting in a hospital atrium with bad coffee, out of volunteering when someone you love needs something only you can give, out of staying in the room even when the room is quiet and the other person is looking at the television and you do not know if any of this is working. They are built out of choosing, every day, to be there. Last month I drove to Austin on a Tuesday, not because it was my scheduled weekend, not because a lawyer said I could, because Lily asked if I wanted to come to her history presentation at school. She was presenting on the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. I sat in the back of a classroom full of 16-year-olds and listened to my daughter explain load distribution and cable tension in a way that made me realize she had been listening to me all along, even during the years when I thought she was not. Afterward, she found me in the parking lot and said, "Did I get the engineering stuff right?" I said, "You got all of it right." She smiled the way she used to smile when she was small, with her whole face. I drove back to Houston that night, and I did not grip the steering wheel too hard, and I did not stare at the ceiling when I got home. I slept better than I had in 4 years. Biology did not make me her father. Presence did. And if I could give any man in my situation one piece of advice, it would be this. Do not confuse a legal document with a relationship. Do not confuse distance with absence. Do not let anyone convince you that loving someone quietly is the same as giving up on them. It is not. Keep showing up, even when it costs you something. Especially then. That is all I know. That is everything I know. And if you are sitting somewhere right now feeling like the outside of a life you used to be at the center of, I want you to hear me when I say it is not over. It is not over until you stop choosing. Choose. I will see you in the next one.